We had two in the spring featuring the legal and the investment banking professions. And this fall, on October 9th, we had one on the medical profession. I must say that we were all surprised at the number of people who attended. The first one on legal attracted 60 attendees, the one on investment banking 80, the one on medical 180, and I guess we had 338 people register for this in 3 venues, and I guess we'll get a head count at the end. So, and the feedback that we've heard has been positive. Going forward, we do expect to cover a number of professions each academic year. Although the audience is both alumni and students, we're generally going to try to stick to the academic year since a large portion of the attendees are students. And the ones that we're thinking of for the spring include entrepreneurism, investment banking, law, and education. So we're going to play around with those. So you should look forward to perhaps hearing about those. And if you have an interest in those professions, we'll look forward to seeing you. There's one thing that is unique about this particular series, and that is we have 3 simultaneous venues. The meeting room on Park Avenue, where 2 of the panelists are. The meeting room here at Lindsay Chitnet at Yale, and then a large number of people who are participating by an audio conference call. And we've connected, as you can tell, the New York and the Yale locations via video conference. As I mentioned before, we had 338 people register for this, so a fairly substantial number, and about 70% are students. Before I introduce the speakers, however, I'd like to thank a number of people and organizations, because this is truly a collaborative effort on the part of a number of organizations. By the way, all those phones you're hearing are people who are dialing into the webinar, so I guess that's a good sign that people are dialing in. There are actually quite a few organizations, both at Yale and outside of Yale, who've collaborated to help here. First, I'd like to thank Elaine Mazzarella, Elizabeth Rochford, and Denise Burns of the Yale Undergraduate Career Services, Savina Dahl of the Asian American Cultural Center, and the 2 able student assistants, Mendy Yang and Leah Nishikawa, are here in the room here, who in fact got the pizza, so if you love the pizzas, you should thank them. Steve Bloom and Elizabeth Mosher from AYYA, Trish Takemoto from the Association of Asian American Yale Alumni, and she's in the New York location. Maya Liu and Ken Mohan of the Yale Alumni Association of New York, the Junior Class Council, and others. Mia, who are particularly helped in logistics and speaking of the program. All of these organizations have contributed towards the planning and the marketing of this event. But I also want to give special thanks to Paul Wise, the law firm, who has graciously provided the use of the meeting room in New York and their video conferencing equipment. Those of you who have any is a firm with more than 700 lawyers whose long-standing clients include many of the largest publicly and privately held corporations and financial institutions in the U.S. and around the world. So why are we doing this event? Because after all, there are lots of different speakers and speeches and so forth throughout the academic year. And I think the reason why we started this is very simple, and that is, whereas Yale students are very smart and they are very good at research and so forth, one of the biggest challenges is getting access to candid views about different professions. In my own experience, I recall when I was a student at Yale, I was majoring in physics and math and headed for medical school. And I was very fortunate, actually lucky, quite frankly, that between my sophomore and senior years, I was in an internship at the Mayo Clinic and followed 2 doctors around for the summer. The thing was that although they were very happy to be doctors, they were very careful to explain to me both the pluses and minuses, how long it took to be a doctor and so forth. And I think their candid insights allowed me to realize that although I may or may not have been a good doctor, that really was not the right choice for me, and I was able to shift my interest to be the right place for me. I think that our hope that this series of seminar webinars will help Yale students and alumni get that candid, credible view that I got, over that summer from the two doctors, so they can make intelligent choices about careers. The idea is not to discourage people from a particular path, rather to have people go in for the right reasons rather than the wrong reasons. So for today's events, what I'd like to do is first introduce the panelists and outlined in your invitation. I want to make one note before we start, and that is there are many different types of consulting firms. And although we try to create some variety on this panel, there are really different categories of consulting firms. I think the three panelists today will give you a sense of some of the characteristics of consulting, but there are some segments of consulting that are quite different, like an engineering consulting firm, for example, because engineering work on bridges, for example. And then after I go through the 5 topics, I want to make sure that we have some time to answer questions. What I'd like to do is for those of you who are participating by a conference call, because it's a one-way connection and you're muted so that we don't hear the background noise, you can send your questions by email to yalecareerpanels@gmail.com. It's sitting right here on my iPad here. And so I'll be able to look at the questions and pick ones to read out to the audience. For those people who are here at Yale, there is a microphone over here in front. I'd like anyone asking questions to come up and stand at the mic and pose their question. And similarly, we'd like the same for the people who are in New York. If you're physically in New York or here, just raise your hand. We do expect to end at 5:30, but all the panelists have agreed to stay on for another half hour so that people who want to come up afterwards and ask questions or hand them a resume or whatever it may be, that they're willing to do that. So in terms of our panelists today, we have 3 prominent people from the consulting field. Mark Fuller is the former chairman and CEO and currently strategic advisor to the Monarch Group. He and I are actually classmates from Harvard. And I called him and said, I need someone to panel. He volunteered himself. In spite of the fact he's a graduate from Harvard and not Yale. Karen Gordon is a senior partner and director at the Boston Consulting Group. And Stephen Cotter is a partner at Bain & Company. By the way, before I became an investment banker and was in private equity, I joined Bain when there were 20 people, less than 800 people. And by the way, one of the 20 was Mitt Romney, so afterwards I can tell you my opinion. So I'll serve as moderator. So let's get started. By the way, I'm not going through the biographies of the 3 panelists because that was an invitation, so you can read their biographies. But the one thing they've all promised is that although they love their profession, which we know, they have promised to be candid and to focus on both the challenges as well as the joys of being the consulting profession. So let's get started. I think that the first one is a macro question, which is where is the profession headed, good and bad? And maybe we'll let the people in New York start. Karen, do you want to get started and make a comment?
Sure. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I think that consulting still has an enormous amount of growth ahead of it. Certainly, premium strategy consulting of the type that all 3 of our firms pursue. We have felt for a long time, as a firm, and I think as a sector broadly, that our business is supply constrained and not demand constrained. That the hardest thing about our business is finding and developing the right kind of talent to meet our clients' needs, and we have to do that in a very particular kind of apprenticeship way that controls the way in which we can grow. But that there are more and more companies in environments of increasing uncertainty and instability. That demand for consulting is strong when times are good, is strong when times are bad, different kinds of demands for the work, and is in a temporary lull, but quite temporary, in times of uncertainty, when those brief windows, as we've seen a number of times over the last decade, when companies, over a period of months, but short number of months, hunker down and try to just, wait and figure out which way they think the wind is blowing. We are maybe in a little bit of one of those periods right now, but if so, brief. And I expect there to be continued growth in our industry, both domestically and even more rapid within the emerging markets.
Yeah, Ken, I would echo that. I think that growth over the last couple of decades has generally been in the double digits from a revenue perspective for many of the firms here, but in general in the strategy side of things, and it looks like it's continuing. And to your point, Karen, it's just the mix, the nature of what we do may change. We may do more of a sort of cost type set of projects in a tough economy and more of a revenue and sort of growth set of priorities in a better economy. But that said, it's generally pretty robust. The one thing I would say that's changed over the last maybe couple of decades, even the last 10 years, 10, 20 years ago, many client organizations, many of the largest companies didn't really have large strategic planning groups or sort of internal strategy consulting staff. And that's really changed. So many of our clients today really have folks that look a lot like us. They went to places like Yale, they went to top business schools, et cetera. So the net effect of that is we have to be sort of that much more on our game in terms of really being able to add value to the toughest problems facing our clients.
Before Mark comments, I just got 6 emails from people who say the dial-in number is not working, so I'm going to ask my colleague Jason Cernan to dial into one of them to make sure that it's working, and that it's not just 6 errant Yale graduates, right? Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Let me just add briefly a couple of thoughts. One thing I'd say about the consulting industry, and my counterparts on the panel have already alluded to this, is it changes a lot. I've been in the business for 30 years, and when I entered the business, there were no personal computers, no laptops, no cell phones, no faxes. Business has changed, and it will continue to change. It's a dynamic business. And when Stephen said you have to stay on top of your game, I couldn't agree more. I think the biggest challenges to the industry will not come from within the industry, meaning competition between or among consulting companies, but from, if you will, substitute products. An awful lot of consulting is still about doing research and intelligence gathering. An awful lot of it's still about doing analysis. But in a world where information is becoming increasingly free and you've got big data, a lot of analysis can be done by applications. What's actually done by the human beings in the consulting profession, admittedly helped by these technologies, is going to change. I believe there'll always be a consulting industry. There will always be room for human advisory. But as you're thinking about the industry, firms that are going to be innovative and as change continues are better places to go than ones that aren't.
Mark, do you think that the structural shift is going to affect certain kinds of consulting more than others?
Well, as you said at the very beginning, Peter, there are so many different kinds of consulting companies. We could walk down the road to the School of Management, and I'm sure any number of professors there are incorporated as consulting companies. There are boutiques, and then there are the giant Accentures of the world. I think that the changes are going to affect the different kinds of companies differently. I think that, again, consulting companies are going to have to win the war for talent. People like all of you sitting in the audience are going to have to be attracted to the industry. Those companies that do will be better off. The companies that are, I said, more innovative and more agile are going to be better off. Companies that just want to do what they did 10 years ago are not going to be very well.
Now, on the second question, it's very interesting because one of the reasons why we're picking particular professions are the ones where there's kind of mythology or misconception. I know the one that we had on medical, there's so many TV shows about being a doctor that, that one was easy to pick because everyone thinks their house or ER or so forth and very glamorous. Consulting, for better or worse, has very few TV programs that maybe did something about consulting. But the question is really, are there some, what are the myths versus the realities? Because every profession has myths versus realities, and I think consulting is no different. So maybe we'll miss it out then. Steve, do you want to start with that?
Sure. There are definitely a lot of myths in this business. You know, the old joke, you give someone their watch and they tell you the time, you know, that's what a consultant does. It's not quite that way, although I guess occasionally it could be. I think in general, there is often a perception that consultants do a lot of analysis and then it sits and ends up in a very fancy binder or blue book on some CEO shelf. And perhaps that may have been the case many years ago. I think more and more consultants really are not just coming up with answers, but helping to actually have impact and really implementing sort of working with the client the sort of ideas and the sort of strategy behind it. And at the end we call it results delivering. But it's all about really trying to figure out how we can move the dial for the client, not just coming up with the theoretically right answer, but actually rolling up our sleeves and actually implementing. So I think there's a myth-reality misconception there that increasingly the industry is about really moving the dial and implementing the work, whether it's a strategy consulting firm or more of a sort of process consulting firm.
Karen?
Let me come at this maybe from a different way, which is I think the myth that so many undergrads and MBAs are told in recruiting, or at least is suggested in recruiting by all the firms is, you're going to be the advisor to CEOs. And yes, the work that we do in the firms like where all three of us work, the work that the firm does is advising the CEOs and C-suite executives, and it is working on the most critical issues facing these companies. At the same time, when you are 23, you don't get to march yourself into the CEO's office, sit down and say, let me tell you what you should do. And I think that it's a very important thing to think about, which is there is very much, to Steve's point, there's an enormous amount of work that goes into getting to the recommendations that we develop. An enormous amount of analysis and data collection and translating data into insight, and an enormous amount of time spent working side by side with our clients to try to help convince them to see the world in a different way. And the path to getting a CEO decision is long and complicated. It is rewarding when you get there, but you shouldn't think that because you're the one who made that model, you're going to get to be the one to have the one-on-one discussion that says, let me tell you to go right and not left.
Let's ask Jason. Jason, I've now gotten another 8 emails saying that the audio is not good. Have you tested it?
We're currently testing the phone system at the moment, so having Tom dial in. I dialed in as participant on the primary line, and I'll update you guys in probably a few seconds.
Okay, all right. Let's turn to Mark then, because I'm getting quite a few emails here. So, Mark?
Well, I think that Steve and Karen really made the points on the most important predominant myths. Just to double underscore what they said, it's just as much or more about process than it is about answers and analysis. And there's an awful lot of gritty, hard work that's involved in it. One of the things that's not a myth about the consulting industry is you have to work hard, and you have to put a lot of hours in. And sometimes people say, yes, but it's a glamorous industry. You could have fooled me. It's true that you meet some very interesting people, and generally speaking, deal with some very interesting problems. But salt mine comes to me when I think about the average day or the average week for a lot of people, especially when you join. It's hard work. It's not that glamorous. But as Karen said, when you get to the end and have the impact, it's very rewarding.
And I'll ask this question and ask any panelist to comment. one of the things that is, I think, one characteristic of consulting that's not necessarily known to students is that there's a lot of travel. In fact, there's some consulting firms that basically their philosophy is they park you in the client's office in Kansas City or someplace else from Monday through Friday, and then you come home on the weekend. To what extent, can you comment on that? And I think that is at least my impression of what happens a lot in consulting at different levels. Do you feel that's still true? Is that, or is it changed at all because of technology?
I don't think technology changes that. I think most consulting, certainly we try for local staffing as much as possible, and our broad geographic, both U.S. and global footprint allows for that. We have 73 offices around the world. It does help us have people live where the clients are, but that said, that often that doesn't work, and we don't have an office in Dubuque, but we have a client in Dubuque, and lots of things that look like that. I think it takes, typically we are on the ground 3 to 4 days a week, not 5, but 3 to 4. And we and I think many other firms believe strongly that you make change happen in an organization, by being side by side with your clients. It's not that clients just didn't have the data and didn't have the analysis. There are significant, they are often missing the data, but there are real cultural barriers within an organization that keep organizations from changing. There are real gaps in alignment within a management team that keep an organization from changing. And you have to be with your clients in order to help them to solve those problems. And so I don't think, railroad. I don't think that I don't think those things are going to change. So I think that the travel portion of this job is real. I think the travel portion of it is going to stay. And you might get to fly business class, but increasingly you might not. And you stay in decent hotels, but you're not spending a lot of time in the hotel. You're spending the time, in the client sites. And so you have to be prepared in this career for a life that can feel disjointed.
Yeah, I would agree with what Karen said. Just 2 additional points. One is, the travel is very variable. So you might be based in New York, and if you're on a New York client for 4 months, you literally may not travel for the entire 4 months. That said, if you're based in New York and your client's in Cleveland, you may be there, Monday to Thursday, almost every week for 3 or 4 months. So it's very variable, very all over the place. But one thing on a positive note about the travel, I think all 3 of these firms and others really give lots of opportunity to folks that want to travel. So we have programs like externships where someone says, I want to go to Shanghai for 6 months, or I want to go to Brazil for a year, or I want to go to London for one project, and very much encourage that. And so folks that want to sort of travel and sort of be exposed to other cultures and other experiences, that's a positive. And I think that's true probably across these firms.
Karen, I want to direct this question at you. In the last 2 panels we've had the topic of gender issues with regard to, are there particular challenges for women who are in the profession? I know that the last one on the medical one of our panelists was a female doctor and said, look, the reality is it's tough to have a family and be a mother and also to be a doctor at the same time. There are ways around it, but you just have to realize that. Is that something you want to comment on, or you don't make that want to comment on?
No, absolutely. I actually, and I know this may feel counterintuitive to people, but I think this is an amazing career for women. I have 3 children. My boys I have a 12-year-old, and I have twins who will be 11 next month. I had been at BCG for 3 years when my oldest was born. And I actually think this has been phenomenal because the fact that the work is project-based means that you can come in and come out and your job isn't filled by someone else. I look at so many of my clients and my friends who are in senior executive positions and when they've had a child and then they wanted to be out on maternity leave for 3 months or 6 months, someone else took the role and they had to fight to get their jobs back. And because our work is project-based in this industry, I've never had to do that. Because our work is project-based and the projects can be scoped differently, there's also been the opportunity to work a more flexible schedule. So I spent 7 years working at reduced capacity, and then I went back to full-time in 2009, and I think that was made possible by the unique construct of this industry. We talk about travel, and I obviously am the first to admit there is a lot of travel, but you can also, your choice of geography and practice influences that a lot. So one of the reasons that my husband and I came to New York was because there's so much business here in New York. And one of the reasons that I work in consumer is that there are so many consumer companies within a 1-hour driving radius of my home. And so being really thoughtful about how I manage my work has made it possible for me to sleep at home the overwhelming majority of nights. Now, different people will make different choices. They'll make choices based on wanting to solve a particular kind of problem, or wanting to work in a particular sector, or wanting to work with a particular set of individuals, and that might lead them to different, work-life balance trade-offs. I've managed my career in a particular way, but I think that works well and can work for many women. I would say also that an increasing number of the senior executives within our clients are women. They're looking to have women on their teams, and so the consulting environment that I came to when I first came, this was an overwhelmingly male industry serving overwhelmingly male clients. I mean, I'm not going to say that we're anywhere close to 50-50. Let's not pretend, but it looks different, than it did 16 years ago, and that momentum is only good for women.
Now, I'm going to, having been in consulting myself, so and having gone from junior ranks to senior ranks, so I have some experience. Things that on this I'm going to point out, and I want people to react to is, one myth is, boy, not only, Karen, as you said, I'm going to advise CEOs, right? Maybe in the first week, right? But the other is, one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people who are in consulting at different levels is there's a certain kind of frustration, because the reality is your role as a consultant is to give advice, but you're actually not the principal. In fact, you're not executing the advice. So one of the frustrations, which is a reality, there's a myth that you come up with these great ideas, you recommend the client, they take your recommendation, they implement it perfectly, and afterwards, you feel great. The reality is a substantial portion of the recommendations you make are not accepted by clients, even if they're very good, for lots of reasons, political reasons, and so forth. And even if they accept your recommendation, a significant portion of the time, the way they actually implement it, you may not get the results that you want. So that is the reality, and I'm just saying, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be in consulting, but if you go into consulting with the idea that your recommendations are always be accepted and then they're going to implement it, well, then I think you're going to be, very frustrated. I think the other is if you're the kind of person who needs to actually go and do it, then consulting is not, because consulting by its very nature is really giving advice to other people, right? Doesn't mean it's bad. It's just different. I'd like our panelists to comment on that. If you disagree, that's fine too. Or if you want to elaborate, that's too.
Yeah, it's a rich field, Peter. I think that for many, many people, myself included, emotional experience of consulting is bimodal or schizophrenic. It's extremely frustrating some of the time, and it's extremely rewarding some of the time. I don't know what the numbers are, and I'm sure they'd be different firm to firm, and leaving out up-route policies. I don't think more than 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 people join out of school the consulting industry actually stay in consulting. They go off and do something else. The ones who stay and do well get used to that frustrating component of consulting. The frustration can come from a number of sources. One is the one that you mentioned, Peter, which is you work really hard and you come up with good ideas and then they're not implemented or not implemented well. And why did I waste my 6 months or my 12 months on all of that for no? There's another kind of frustration that many people who join the consulting industry become more and more frustrated by the fact they're not principals. I'm smarter than those people. I work harder than those people. Actually care more than those people. Why am I not the principal? And of course, many people experience that frustration to a terminal degree, leave consulting and become principals, and then a bunch of them come back because they realize they actually have more impact as advisors than principals. But there is a non-trivial degree of frustration, and getting used to it is part of the game. I suspect there's frustration in all industries and in all professions, but there are particular forms, and particularly virulent forms of consulting.
I'm not going to pause and ask Jason. I'd like now a definitive view as to whether the dial-in number is working, because I have substantial data here that suggests it's not.
Peter, Jason is actually outside of the room currently trying to dial into the secondary number. So I'm kind of waiting.
Is the primary working?
The primary number was not working. I'm currently trying to transmit the secondary number via my cell phone, which I think is working, but I'm kind of waiting to get confirmation from Jason.
Okay. All right. So
I'll alert you when he confirms.
Okay. All right. Well, then I guess all these emails I'm getting are accurate. All right. Let me ask again on this question of myths versus realities as well, because this is actually an important part of the topic. Any of the panelists have any other myths they think are important to communicate to the audience?
I guess, Peter, I have a slightly different view on this advisor versus principal point, which is that when I look across many operating companies, I would say that there are very, very few people within those companies who have the ability to act unilaterally. And that what we do in this business is advise, yes, and we don't get to make the decisions. But when I look at within my clients, I would say what many of them do is advocate and build consensus, and very few of them get to make decisions unilaterally. And they often feel as frustrated with the decision-making processes being on the inside as we can feel about them being on the outside. And so I would just say that getting organizations to change is difficult regardless of where you sit. And that part of the power of being an advisor actually is that you often have the freedom to say a set of things that those within the organization, because they're concerned about the politics and how that fits with their ongoing career and who exactly is aligned with them, don't feel as confident to say. And so I sometimes feel like I have more ability to move an organization than many of the senior executives who sit within it.
Peter, one additional sort of myth versus reality might be around the thought that Monitor or BCG or Bain only works with sort of the world's largest organizations, and certainly many of our clients are sort of global, Fortune 50, Fortune 100, or whatever. We actually work with quite a number of sort of mid-size organizations as well, across sectors, by the way, not just the for-profit sector, but the social sector as well, both pro bono and paid. And for consultants on some of those projects working with smaller organizations, they actually do get to interface with the senior team on a very regular basis. So there you could have a 23-year-old interfacing with the CEO of a small or mid-sized company regularly, whereas that probably wouldn't happen for one of the Fortune 50 companies. So again, it's a broader, a greater diversity of clients than I think people often think in terms of the sort of the large strategy firms.
Okay. Next question. part of what we're trying to talk about here is a match, as opposed to, I mean, each career is different. Some people fit one particular profession, others fit others. And I guess there are two things. One is, do you have the skills, but also, does it fit your personality and your lifestyle issues or your income needs and so forth? So this really leads to the next question, which is...
Hey, Peter, sorry to cut you off. Jason has confirmed that the primary number is working now.
It is working. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hopefully people will try to dial in again. All right. So really, what are the characteristics of people who tend to do well and also who are happy? By the way, I make that distinction because you could be very good but unhappy in a profession. It doesn't mean that just because you're good that you're going to be happy. And I guess it's possible to be happy and not very good too, I guess. But I guess it doesn't last very long like that. But comment on that. And my next question is going to be people who end up not fitting. But comment on that. What are the characteristics? Because after all, in consulting, it is an up or out profession, like many professions. And some people make it and some people don't. So what tend to cause people to end up not doing well, but also being happy in the consulting profession? Let's start with Mark, since he tended to be the third and you the part, right?
Well, let me start out by saying that some of the characteristics that lead to success have certainly been suggested by comments that have already been made. And I do think it's a hard-working industry, and so hard-working people tend to succeed more than people who are smart but less hard-working. I think that the EQ skills are more important the more senior you get. And again, we've talked about the myth that it's all about analysis and writing up a great presentation or book and handing it over, and that is a myth. So having a good balance of smart enough but with good EQ skills to run these processes and help the clients get over their own barriers and internal divisions. I think that the thing though that I would emphasize most, I think that consulting, particularly if you're a young person, is the absolute best thing you can do if you want to learn stuff. You have an incredible opportunity to learn a variety of things. Learn different industries, learn across sectors, learn different disciplines within business. You have that opportunity. And I think people who take on the industry as kind of a continuous learning experience enjoy it and succeed. And people who are more focused and need a lot of certainty tend to experience more of the frustration and are often less happy and less successful.
Yeah, I can't agree more that this is, an incredible industry for so many different kinds of folks. When I joined consulting out of business school, I thought I would just stay a year or two, and my litmus test was, as long as I'm having fun and growing. And here I am, 20 years later, and it's an incredible industry to learn so much. And in terms of the folks that I tend to see that succeed and that really like it and that are happy, in addition to the sort of traits that you mentioned, Mark, clearly folks that are really passionate and that are curious in nature and that are good with ambiguity.
Karen?
I would agree with everything that my colleagues have said. I would emphasize a couple of things. One is, as you were just saying, this tolerance for ambiguity is so important. You don't know where you're going to be the next week. You don't know whether a project is going to work out or not. There's a moment in every project, if not a number of moments in every project, where you think the whole thing is going to fall apart. And you have to this job. And I worked at P&G in brand management before I came to BCG, and I would say is that the highs are higher here and the lows are lower. The job is much less predictable, so you have to be really comfortable with that. I think the other thing is you have to really be an optimist, because if you're not a natural optimist, you have a very difficult time dealing with those ups and downs.
Now, let's turn to the second question, which is, what types of people tend not to do well or end up unhappy, and why? Steve, you want to start out?
Sure. I mean, it's sort of the reverse of some of the things we spoke about. I think first and foremost, to Karen's point, folks that are really not comfortable with ambiguity, that's really a characteristic that I don't think those folks are going to be happy or successful, in consulting, because there's so much change on a regular basis. I think the EQ, to the point made earlier, and sort of empathy is really important. So folks that are really just sort of, want to laser focus on analysis, this is not, at least these kinds of firms, that the firms represented here today are certainly not the right sort of match, because it's really all about working closely with our clients, rolling up our sleeves, and helping them, solve problems and actually have impact. So just analysis for the sake of it is not a trait that's going to work out. And then obviously the point around working hard and being open to travel. We work, we real hard, and travel is sort of part of the job on a regular basis. So if one is not comfortable with those things, then this is going to be a tough industry as well.
Mark?
Again, I agree with everything that's been said, and I don't think issues like hard work, travel, work-life balance can be overemphasized. Just on this very important point about empathy, the point about ambiguity certainly, I think, has been made very clearly. When you're a consultant, you have to think about why you're hired. It's not true every time, but a lot of time you're hired because the client's got a problem. The client can't do what the client wants to do. The clients, as Karen was saying, they're smart and they're trained in the same schools and what have you. They can't do it. By hiring you, they've made themselves vulnerable. If you're not equally able to make yourself vulnerable to them, the partnership's not going to work. And there are an awful lot of people who come from elite schools who are pretty defensive about making themselves vulnerable. And their inability to do it makes them less successful and ultimately unhappy because they're really smart, they work hard, and they're failing.
How do you deal with the following? I guess, Mark, you said, well, often a client will hire because it's a difficult problem. Now, what happens when the CEO hires you and then lo and behold, 4 weeks into it, he says, I really want you to come to the following conclusion. Now, by the way, this is not the hypothetical that doesn't happen. It happens a lot. So, and it's, I think it's, by the way, it also happens in investment banking, by the way. So, this is not just a consulting problem. So, any of the panelists want to comment on that, because I suspect every one of the panelists, has been through this before, because it's a pretty common, shall we say, malady, right? So, any comments on that? What do you do in that kind of situation?
I would say I do not find myself in the situation that you described with that level of frequency. I certainly think that almost all our clients have a strong hypothesis about what the answer is as we go into this, but that part of the power of what we do is that we bring new data and we bring new insight and we bring new analytics and we bring a new way of framing and articulating the problem. And that therefore we really almost never end up in the situation where the client says, but I insist that the answer be X, while we say, but the answer is Y. In this situation, I've been through lots of situations where the client has a strong hypothesis, and we spend a lot of time talking about, if we don't agree with that, why that is, bringing data to bear, sitting side by side with the clients, working through until we get to a collective answer that we all feel comfortable with. I can tell you that in the one example that I can think of right now that I've personally been in, where we felt so really strongly that the answer was something quite different from what the client insisted that it should be, that we walked away from the work. And then we feel really strongly that it's that the integrity of what we do, and I'm sure that everyone on this agrees, that the integrity of what we do and of how we get there is stronger than any one client situation, and that it is important for us to be able to stand by the recommendations that we develop and not and not make the recommendation simply because a person who is paying the bill wishes that it would come out that way.
Yeah, we're very rigorous, and I'm sure this is true of the other firms here as well. Even up front, when we take on an assignment and scope the work, we're really disciplined around saying no if in fact we think there's not true openness on the part of the senior executive team or the board, whoever is engaging us, around the answer and around the ability to change things. So, really from the very beginning, which is why I think we tend not to get ourselves in that situation where a month down the road we're asked to say to give a specific answer, because really up front we try real hard to absolutely say no and turn down an assignment, to Karen's point, rather than do something that we don't think is truly going to be open.
I do think what does happen though quite frequently is we agree to answer a question and we get 3-4 weeks into the problem and we realize it's the wrong question. And that happens all the time, and a lot of what we have to do with our clients is spend time saying, you know what, here's what we've done so far and here's what it frames up, and in fact we think that, I mean, it's not many degrees away, but we think that you need, the question shouldn't go here, it should go there. Here's why, how we want to address it differently, here's how it changes the work plan. And those can be tough conversations, but they're the right ones.
Let me ask one question. 70% of the audience, at least we think the audience that we have, we think the phone lines we're hitting in, are students and undergraduates. And so they'll be coming, if they're doing consulting, would be directly from undergraduates. And obviously a lot of people join firms like, Bain or Monitor or BCG out of business school, but they join in a different kind of program. And each of you just very quickly comment about what the program is for undergraduates. Is it a 2-year thing and then you won't move on or go back to business school, maybe come back? Or what is the structure of the career path for that's relevant to 75 or 70% of people in this audience? Mark?
This is a question here where I think each firm will have its own approach, so I'll just briefly talk about Monitor's approach. Monitor is a heavy undergraduate-oriented hirer. We have extensive internship opportunities for undergraduates, even while they're still undergraduates. We tend to send proven undergraduates to graduate school, business school, for example, rather than emphasize hiring in the open market for MBAs or graduates. So, and there are no formal protocols that bar an undergraduate who doesn't have any kind of graduate degree from performing any of the functions that a graduate person could perform. So in fact, if you really look at how Monitor work, undergraduates during their 5th or 6th year have much more authority and responsibility than newly minted MBAs who had not been undergraduates at Monitor before. I could keep going, but I'm going to...
Steve and Carol, just quickly what the structure is for incoming undergraduates.
Sure. Well, like Monitor, Bain actually hires extensively at the undergraduate level. We call folks joining right out of college ACs, associate consultants, and they tend to stay for at least 2 to 3 years. And in the 3rd year, we have a wonderful externship opportunity where folks could either spend 6 or 12 months in another location, typically outside of the country that they joined, and or at either a nonprofit or other kind of organization. They could spend 6 months at the Boston Red Sox or United Way, all sorts of different opportunities. And or many folks try 6 or 12 months at a private equity firm. So lots of great opportunities in that 3rd year, just to get folks a sense of what's out there across the different sectors, the social sector, the public, and the nonprofit. And then similar, it sounds like, to Monitor, we then sort of support and pay for some folks to go back to graduate school, to business school, and then rejoin Bain 2 years later. But some folks actually just go straight through and become consultants after ACs at Bain without going to school. So it's very open, very individualized to the individual.
Steve, I hope the recent performance of the Boston Red Sox is not related to your junior people's recommendation.
No, hopefully we have some folks in the Giants as well, so I'm not sure about that.
Karen, quickly, and then we'll move to the next question.
our pyramid is more heavily weighted towards MBAs than it is towards undergrads, although we do hire a very significant number of undergrads who we call associates. Our associates come for 2 years. They're then offered a third-year program, either to stay for a third year in their home office, or we have what's called the Associate Abroad program, so that our associates get an international experience in the third year, during which time they are promoted to consultant. And consultants are what we call our graduate degree folks. So you progress along that same path that our MBAs are coming in to. A very high percentage of our associates we sponsor to graduate school, including which are mostly by choice MBAs, but we also sponsor to law school, medical school, because we're very interested in having a broad range of graduate degrees within the firm, and those folks then can return as consultants, progressing already ahead from the consultant credit that they've earned, in their what's we call APC, Associate Promoted to Consultant period. We think that our associates are staffed on our teams into the same kinds of roles that consultants are staffed on. And one of the things that's important about our model is that our associates are not managed by the new MBA consultants. They're managed by the principals on our team, just like our consultants are. So as an associate, this is a structure that cuts both ways. So our associates think it's terrific that they get managed by the principals. Our consultants think it's frustrating that they don't have an associate working for them. As opposed to other firms that are structured differently. But we do think that this is a particularly powerful experience for our undergrads, as well as a structure that really makes for a stronger, much less hierarchical team construct within our client teams.
Just 2 additional points. One is, and this is probably true across the firms, we offer remarkable training for folks out of college. So there's obviously on the project, sort of on the ground training on a regular day-to-day basis with great mentoring and coaching set of relationships. But we bring folks from a global perspective together across different tenure levels. So 6 months in out of college, for example, we'll bring many folks to Cape Cod for a week of training, or to Barcelona, or to Scotland, or to Santa Monica, et cetera. And folks meet their sort of peer group across the globe in each of these locations and other locations, and it's a regular basis every year or two. We invest a huge amount of time and money, and the training is actually done by partners, by being partners. It's not outside folks. So it's a really great approach. And the second thing is back to your question around what kinds of characteristics make a good consultant and folks that are happy. We very much, and I think this is true across the firms, don't believe that one has to have a particular training in terms of a particular discipline. We believe in diversity of ideas and perspectives. We want folks with, liberal arts perspectives, engineering, math, the whole 9 yards. And we feel like any set of training, as long as you learn how to think and how to learn, that's what it's all about. So it's not like you say, if you didn't do an economics undergraduate, you can't apply. It's exactly the opposite. Anything is actually appropriate as long as you're smart and passionate, and sort of have a well-rounded set of experiences.
Well, I'm going to be a little honest, and I think our panelists have erred a little bit on the moody side here. Because I'll be fair, I think the consulting industry is great for certain people, but it is a very stressful, difficult one for others. And that's my observation, from all of this. Let me ask you this last question, and then we'll turn to questions from the audience. Some people stay in consulting and retire as partners or whatever it may be, right? But that's a small number, as you all know, because of the structure of the industry. The vast majority of people who go into consulting end up leaving either the graduate school or going to a different profession and so forth. So the real question is, what are the exit routes to other professions or other careers? I'll start out by saying, to be balanced about it, is one of the challenges about being consulting is if you're in consulting after a number of years, the good news is your income will be greater than your average person in business and so forth. The bad news is that actually can be a problem. Because moving to a corporation and trying to get a job in a corporation, now you're making 50%, 100% more than the person, the position you want to take. Although they would like to believe, that you would take a pay cut, most people are very skeptical. So, and I know that from companies, and that's the challenge. I mean, the good news is in consulting you can make more money than the average person. The bad news, it actually can be a barrier as you're exiting, if in fact you can make all the way through the department. So that's one of the things. But I'm going to ask over this general question, which is, if you don't stay in the profession until retirement, what are your exit routes to other professions? Steve?
Sure. Actually, the vast majority of folks at each of these firms don't stay, don't stay through retirement, and many folks really use it as a springboard, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years, and then go and do something different, and that's absolutely fine. And we believe that a couple of years at any of these firms is absolutely phenomenal in terms of the learning experience that each person would get. So, for example, when I talk to seniors in college or second-year students in business school that are thinking of the entrepreneurial path versus consulting, my advice is very much spend 2 or 3 years at a place like Bain or BCG or Monitor, and you'll be that much more successful if then you actually launch an entrepreneurial business, or if you want to go into a client organization, you'll likely join it at a more senior level than if you were to join right out of either undergrad or business school. So I think that for those folks that don't actually stick around for the duration in consulting, it's a phenomenal opportunity to really learn from different perspectives some of the toughest problems and solve them, and really be exposed to all sorts of business problems, and then come in at really experienced levels.
I would say that it's a lot harder to get in. I mean, at least if I look at the firms like ours, it is much harder to get in and to stay in than it is to get out to a place that you want to be.
Yeah.
And our people go to lots and lots of different, they go into big companies, they go into small companies, they go into strategy roles, they go into line operating roles, they go to private equity, they go to startups, they go to research houses, they go to nonprofits. I mean, there's an enormous array of the places that we go. I think if I were going to be cautious about this, what I would say is, look, the turnover in consulting is depending on the year and depending on the level, is typically in the high teens to low 20s every year. And so, the group that half the people you start with will not be there 3 years from the time you start. And I'm not talking about the undergrads where the program ends and people naturally go back to school, but I'm talking about the people who are thinking about making longer term career decisions. And so a lot of that is voluntary, but a lot of it is involuntary, because, as I think Peter said at the beginning of this is an up or out industry. And so you have to be comfortable with the idea that it might not be your choice as to whether you stay, having nothing to do with the health of the firm, but everything to do with the fact that you are getting much more frequent performance reviews in consulting than you'll ever get in industry. You'll get a review after, at least this was my experience, and I see it all the time, shockingly detailed performance review after every project, or in the middle of long ones. You'll get multiple ones, more detailed than you've ever had, you'd have in any industry. You'll get 6-month and annual full-scale reviews, and you are being evaluated against your peers, and that's a more challenging construct.
But the reality, Karen, is the way it works is the economics of consulting is you have to have a pyramid. It's simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order for the numbers to work. So separate from evaluation and so forth, it's just an economic model. Just like law firms, they couldn't survive if they didn't have up or out. And it's an economic thing. But that's what you have to live with if you think about consulting or any of these professional careers, whether it's legal or otherwise. It's the structure of the industry. Let me turn now to the audience to ask some questions. Let me first ask if anyone here at Yale has any questions, and if so, just come up to the mic here and ask it. Anyone? Raise a hand. Okay, come on up.
I just wanted to ask about the you talked about the international offices, and I was wondering, do you hire mostly, say, an office in Brazil? Do you hire mostly local talent there, or do you send people from the States there, or is it 50-50? What's the makeup of the offices down there?
Our bias, I mean, from incoming hiring, our bias is towards local talent, but it's not 100% local talent, and there's a real variation by office, by country, based on what the talent pool looks like in that geography. We do feel very strongly about local language capability. So even though our business, our global business operates in English, you have to be able to speak the local language in order to be able to function.
Yeah, the same with Bain. One needs to speak the local language, even in the UK. But that said, if someone is from the U.S. and speaks Portuguese, and wants to go to Brazil, absolutely, that's a real opportunity, or if they speak the language and want to go to Bangkok, et cetera. Very much we try to have a real mix of folks across each office.
I have a question here from someone who is on the webinar. She says, with firms developing their own internal strategic planning capabilities, what do you think about the long-term sustainability of consulting business? Is there a trend for consulting firms to compete in specialized niche areas instead of advising on high-level general strategy? This is from Serena Xiaoxing Tang. Anyone? Mark?
Well, I think that the Fortune magazine does, not every year, but regularly does announce the Fortune 500 and what percentage of C-level officers are former consultants. And the numbers are astonishingly high and get higher every year. And it goes a little bit to the platform that you've got to go find something else to do when you're either exiled from the consulting industry or want to leave it. There's a lot of internal talent in companies relative to what it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. Having said that, I think that there's probably less threat in some respects from vertical integration by the clients into the consulting business now than there was in the past. Companies want to be lean, and the fact of the matter, it's very hard to have the best consulting advice when it's captive inside the company, partly for reasons that Karen was adducing earlier on. The internal people are in their own political space. They don't feel like they can always tell the truth. But it's just hard for many for highly competitive firms to imagine that they're going to get the best talent all day, every day inside. So I think there's always going to be a non-trivial opportunity for consulting companies to provide both the outside, quote, objective view, but also put together the right team to handle a particular problem. And many of the problems are specialized problems. And it's very hard for a corporation, even a very large corporation, to internalize all of those skills.
Any question from the New York audience? And if so, perhaps if either Tom or Jason, you could ask them to step in front.
Sure.
No? Any questions here? Go ahead.
If you actually just
Stand over here.
You can stand in front of us.
right here. Yeah, we've got one. We've got one actually.
Okay, let's let the New York person, and then you can be next.
Yeah, he's actually just gonna walk up onto the camera for the webinar people. So.
Or do you want me?
Yeah, you can go.
My question to each of the consultants is, if you're sitting with me in a room without the other two guys there, how would you differentiate your firm?
I'm going to say that I think Peter really doesn't want us to use this forum as a way to sell our individual firms. So
Well, how do I tell?
I think this is not a panel to talk about individual firms. It's really about the profession. So in all due respect for the questioner, however, you can ask at least the two panelists in New York after we're done, and they'll be happy to answer the question. Here we have a questioner at Yale.
Hi, thank you for coming. My question is regarding so you guys are talking about the CEOs coming and asking a question. I want to ask if within your firms, do you actually go and reach out and look for other revenue opportunities, like look for projects, like propose or pitch to CEOs, or is it mostly they come to you asking for help on a certain issue?
Anyone want to answer in New York?
And there are, if I step back even from consulting, there are very, very few, if any, successful businesses across any industry that operate just by answering the phone really fast. And I'm not saying that to belittle your question in any way. I mean, we have a huge portion of our business, I think this is true for our, for everyone, but certainly I know for our firm, well more than 80% of our business comes from repeat clients. But even then, I mean, it's not that we wait for them to call. We're in, we've established long-term relationships. We're in a constant dialogue with our clients about what's on their minds, what's important to them, out of which we're bringing our experts. We're talking with them about opportunities. We're suggesting things to them that we see that they, that we think that they should be doing that will strengthen their business. And so that's an important part of business development, and it's an important part of making our clients successful. A small portion of our business comes from, I would total greenfield prospecting, but it's more than, it's more than zero, and every long-term client relationship had to start from somewhere.
Yeah, and I would agree with Karen. And the other thing is, we spend a lot of time and effort in research and, in sort of coming in writing articles, thought leadership in across different functional or industry perspectives, which typically, hopefully gets on sort of the CEO circuit in terms of, gets read by senior teams. And they often, look at that and say, hey, I'd love to continue the dialogue with you, and that often leads to something. That's true across, these firms. But also, like Karen, I'd say the vast majority of our work is repeat business, so to speak. Folks that are really happy with the impact that we've had, that want to help, that want us to help on other pressing issues.
I'm going to let Mark have the last word if he wishes on this issue.
Again, in the case of Monitor, it's very similar that most of our clients are repeat or relationship clients. I think the distinction I'd make is most of the selling that you do in the consulting industry is to your existing clients. But most of the firms, as Stephen was saying, have some non-trivially strong marketing effort, which, and I will pay a compliment to BCG because it's very early on, perspectives, getting newsletters and content out to the clients. I think consultants write a lot more books nowadays. Some of them are actually good. And consultants tend to attend conferences and give speeches, what have you, and that drums up interest, brings people into the pipe, but it's not like a lot of industries insofar as that you're doing a lot of cold calling on people that you've never met and have not asked you in.
Well, it's now 5:38, and what I'd like to do is to thank
Peter, we do have one more question. We've got an attendee actually hoping to ask a question if we have time.
In New York?
Yes.
Well, unless it's a really earth-shattering one, standing in the way of going to dinner, I understand is a very dangerous sport.
He has agreed to simply ask the panelists here in New York.
Okay, he wants to ask what's on the menu at Branford? So go ahead, please.
Oh,
No, we'll talk about it after.
He's just going to ask the panelists here in New York.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you found it helpful. I mean, our objective is essentially for this to be a way in which you can get some perspective that otherwise would be difficult to get. And I want to thank Mindy and Leah for their work here, and Jason and Tom and Trish who are in New York. And everyone enjoy their dinner and drive safely. And we will have another one probably late January, and we'll let you know when that happens. Thank you very much.